In the modern day, Ben Whittaker has become one of the most talked about young prospects carrying the banner of showmanship in the ring. By 2024, he was still carving out his reputation, a man whose style blended skill with swagger. He entered the ring not just to fight, but to put on a show. His movements as calculated for effect as they were for effectiveness. One night, an experienced challenger named Khaled Gradia stepped in, hoping to tarnish Whittaker's perfect record. But the moment the bell rang, it was as if Whittaker was chiseling Gradia's tombstone. He was sharp, fast, untouchable. Gradia swung, but his punches landed on air. Whittaker's counters were sharp, his defense impeccable, and his footwork left the veteran punching at shadows. The crowd laughed and cheered as Whittaker combined skill with mockery, humiliating his opponent in real time. For Gradia, there was no way out but through Whittaker's fists, and those fists found his face again and again. The referee, seeing enough of the one-sided demolition, stepped in and spared Gradia further punishment. It wasn't just a win for Whittaker, it was a performance, a statement that a new kind of showman had arrived. But if Whittaker is a modern symbol of swagger, the blueprint was written decades earlier by Emmanuel Augustus, better known to boxing fans as the Drunken Master. Augustus was the pioneer of boxing theatrics, a man whose style baffled opponents and delighted audiences. Against Ray Oliveira, Augustus didn't just fight, he danced. From the very first seconds, he slipped into his rhythm, weaving, twirling, bouncing as though he were choreographing a routine rather than engaging in combat. Oliveira, tough and experienced, found himself lost, swinging at a man who wasn't where he appeared to be. Augustus dodged punches with movements so unorthodox they seemed reckless, yet somehow they worked. He threw double punches, shuffled his feet in impossible patterns, and laughed at danger. For Oliveira, it was a nightmare. He tried to fight back, but every time he thought he had Augustus cornered, the Drunken Master spun out of reach, firing back with crisp counters. By the later rounds, Oliveira's face told the story. Swollen, bloodied, broken, not only physically, but mentally. Even when Oliveira attempted to mock Augustus by imitating his movements, he only exposed himself further, looking less like a warrior and more like an amateur actor in a poor imitation. Augustus didn't just beat him, he humiliated him, then ended the fight with disgust etched across his face. It was more than boxing. It was performance art. And then there was Prince Naseem Hamed, perhaps the most flamboyant showman in boxing history. The prince wasn't content with just winning. He had to perform. His entrances alone were legendary. Somersaults into the ring, robes sparkling under the arena lights, the grin of a man who knew the crowd had come to see him dance as much as fight. But when the bell rang, it wasn't just flash. His reflexes were razor sharp, his unorthodox stance and wide-angled punches bewildered opponents. Against Jose Badillo, Prince Naseem turned the ring into his stage. He slipped punches with head movement so exaggerated it bordered on parody, taunted with his hands down, and fired back with corkscrew uppercuts that snapped Badillo's head back. The crowd roared as Badillo, frustrated and outclassed, tried to smother the fight into a clinch. But Prince Naseem wasn't going to let anyone turn his tango into a wrestling match. He danced around Badillo, his combinations sharp, his power undeniable. By the end, Badillo's corner had seen enough and threw in the towel, saving their fighter from further punishment. The prince had put on yet another dazzling performance, his legend as boxing's most flamboyant entertainer cemented. No discussion of boxing showmen would be complete without Roy Jones Jr., a man whose combination of skill, arrogance, and flair made him perhaps the most talented fighter of his era. In 2000, Jones stepped into the ring against Richard the Destroyer Hall, a tall, powerful puncher whose size and knockout record had many predicting trouble for Roy. But Jones, unfazed, put on one of the greatest exhibitions of boxing skill and showmanship ever witnessed. From the opening bell, he toyed with Hall, slipping punches with his hands down, sticking his chin out as bait, and countering with blinding combinations. At one point, Jones knocked Hall to the canvas with a right hand that sent shockwaves through the crowd. But when Hall got up and began mocking Jones, Roy took it personally. What followed was a masterclass in humiliation. Jones unleashed flurries of punches, combinations so fast Hall barely saw them coming. He danced away, grinned at the crowd, raised his arms mid-fight as if to say, "Is this the best you've got?" Hall was battered, bloodied, reduced to nothing more than a sparring partner in Roy's showcase. By the end, the fight should have been stopped long before it was. Jones didn't just beat Hall, He embarrassed him so badly that fans still talk about that night as one of the greatest displays of boxing dominance ever. Long before Whittaker, Augustus, Prince Nassim, or Roy Jones, the greatest of all time, had already set the standard. Muhammad Ali, the original showman, the man who floated like a butterfly and stung like a bee, Ali wasn't just a fighter. He was a poet, a dancer, a revolutionary presence in the ring. In 1966, Ali faced Cleveland Williams in what many still call his most complete performance. From the opening bell, Ali was untouchable. His footwork was poetry, his combinations lightning fast. Williams, powerful and respected, could do nothing. Ali landed punch after punch, shuffling his feet mid-combination, slipping away with a grin, as if the fight were happening in slow motion for him alone. The end came swiftly. Ali dropped Williams with a dazzling sequence and finished him in the third round, leaving the world stunned. It wasn't just victory, it was a demonstration of what boxing could be when fused with artistry. That night, Ali wasn't just a fighter. He was a performer, a man who turned violence into beauty. Even outside the traditional world of boxing, the spirit of showmanship has spread. Michael "Venom" Page, a star of mixed martial arts, brought his unique style into the boxing ring. Known for his hands-down stance, his taunting, his unorthodox movements, Page's fights often look more like exhibitions of creativity than contests of brute force. Against Poland's Mikhail Chiach, Page turned the ring into a circus. He mimicked the drunken master style, clowning, taunting, dancing in front of his opponent. But behind the antics was real danger. In the second round, Page landed a right hand so vicious it folded Chiach like a puppet with its strings cut. The fight was over, but the performance lived on in highlight reels across the world. Each of these fighters, Whittaker, Augustus, Prince Nassim, Roy Jones, Ali, and Venom Page, represent something more than boxing skill. They are reminders that boxing is not just about violence. It is about personality, about artistry, about connecting with the crowd. They infuriated purists who believed boxing should be a gentleman's sport of discipline and humility. Yet they inspired millions who came to see the fight not just as a contest, but as a show. Love them or hate them, these men gave boxing its soul. They showed that in the bloodiest and most ruthless sport, there is still room for beauty, creativity, and even laughter. They turned violence into dance, pain into spectacle, and fights into unforgettable theater. Every time they stepped into the ring, fans knew they weren't just watching boxing, they were watching history.